Hey everyone, and welcome to another exciting episode of If I Knew Then, Mom Edition podcast. I'm your host, Maria, and I'm so excited you're here. This podcast is all about the real motherhood stories, those unfiltered, powerful lessons we wish somebody would have told us before we became moms. Whether it's about healing, identity, or those tiny humans that somehow teach us more about ourselves than we have ever imagined, this space is for it all. Today, I'm honored to have an incredible guest, Sandra. Hi, Sandra.
Hello. I'm so excited to be here.
Thank you so much for being here. So, first question I like to ask, are you a mom? And if you are, how many kids and how old are they?
Yeah, so I am a mom of 2 kids and a fur mom as well. So my children are 4 and 6, and then I have a little doggy.
I have a 2 and a 4-year-old and 2 big dogs. My male dog is like almost between 65 to 70 pounds.
Oh, wow.
He was not supposed to be that big. Like, he was definitely not supposed to be that big. And the female's roughly around in the top 50s. And
Okay.
you're like,
Yeah, it's like a whole nother person.
Yeah, definitely. They're like 3-year-olds. They really are. Especially the male dog.
I say that. I was like, when I had my dog, I had my dog first before my kids. And I definitely was like, all right, this is clearly not the same as having children, but it was a good practice run, the waking up in the middle of the night to potty train and all of that. So it's an experience.
Definitely. And honestly, I kind of wish I would have had the dogs after having kids, because nobody really talks about the postpartum, oh my God, I forgot the word. There's a specific word for it. But that, while you're dealing with the overwhelm and the overtiredness and then the overstimulating, and then you add a dog into the equation, you just it's so much. And I don't know if this has happened to you, but there's times that, with my ADHD, everything does tend to intensify.
Yeah.
And then I have my male dog that has really imprinted in me to the point that he follows me more than my own shadow.
So you really don't get a second to yourself.
Oh, no, there's no such thing as that. Right now they're in my room and I have to close the door, because if not, he'll be right here. And he thinks he's tiny. So he tries to fit in the smallest spaces where he can. And I'm like, dude, you don't fit there.
Yeah, no, I hear that. I think it's a big adjustment for them too after kids. And it's kind of an adjustment for everyone. And, especially for me, my doggy was my baby. And I think there was definitely some doggy anxiety going on for sure after I had my kids, and then all the guilt that goes with that, because you're not giving them the attention. And it was all a very good learning experience and practice for then having more kids. On a small scale. I'm never going to compare it to actually having children, but it's on a small scale.
Yeah, on a small scale it has been, because listen, they were so spoiled that I would even take them to daycare, doggy daycare. That is how I would make them cupcakes and buy them ice cream and whatever. There are, fur babies.
Yes,
and then
yes.
the kids came around and now I'm like, just give me some space, dude. Move back.
And I'm like, did I remember to feed the dog? I don't know. Things change.
I'm right there with you. I'm like, okay, wait, did we walk them? Okay. Do a checklist, because there's some times that it's just it's a lot. And since they don't talk, it's even harder.
Yeah.
Yeah. So on that note, I would love for you to tell us about your motherhood stories, about how to become your pregnancies, all the good stuff, and even the rough parts.
Yeah. I think motherhood for me was something that I had always wanted to do. I always wanted to be a mom. But I felt very much like I needed to kind of do my checklist of things I wanted to get done in life before having kids. So, that meant everything from I needed to have a certain job. I wanted to be in the right relationship and, have a home and all the things. And so I waited for a long time to, till I was okay, I'm ready to have kids. And then it was quite a journey, because it was not a straightforward path. So, I got to a certain point where I was I'm ready to have kids now. And, as being someone who kind of self-identifies as a little bit of a type A kind of perfectionist, I like to be in control and I plan and whatnot. And my, things had sort of worked up until then very well under that sort of whole premise. But when I went to try to have kids, it was not an easy journey. It took a lot longer than I thought. I ended up having 2 ectopic pregnancies, a very, very early loss, just like all the things that you don't think are going to happen. And so, that in and of itself, that process of not even just motherhood, just like trying to become a mother, I think was very eye-opening for me and was sort of my first big lesson in, having to sort of let go of control, which I think is one of the big things we learn in motherhood, is that as much as you want to plan and control and whatnot, like you cannot, you know, and or at least only to a certain extent. And so I think for me personally, my background also is as a physician. I was a primary care physician. And so I went into motherhood thinking that, all right, I'm going to know everything about what I need to do. And I know all their developmental stages and how to, do the basics. And I counsel people on breastfeeding and all these things, right? So I thought I was going in pretty solid given sort of my background and what I knew. And I think motherhood is very, very humbling because, you can have all of the tactical knowledge, but it doesn't necessarily translate to the day-to-day and how you emotionally feel when you're actually confronted with the realities of the experience.
Oh yeah, I can imagine. I was a teacher first, and I've worked with kids for so long that I was like you said, I know the developmental stages, what they go through, how to handle behavior, yada, yada, yada. I can only imagine your level that you definitely know kind of physically, the part of what can happen and all of these things. And yeah, it's nothing, it helps out, with the tips and tricks and whatever, but nothing can really prepare you because at the end of the day, you don't really know what your motherhood story really is going to be. Mm-hmm. You don't know what kid you're going to get. You don't know what adventures they're going to bring into your life that you are going to be learning at the end of the day. Because at least for me, every day is a new lesson. There's something always new coming up.
100%. Yeah. And I think, and I say this to people all the time, it's even if you've done motherhood once, right? You have your first kid and you're all right, now I'm good. Now I know what I'm doing. And you have the second one, and every child is a brand new motherhood experience. And so it's almost you don't throw everything out the window, but certainly a lot of the things that worked and that you learned may completely not apply. And so it's always a very new experience. And so I think it's less about, I think it's less about knowing how to mother or parent or, how to deal with, necessarily the tantrums or the different issues that may come up. I feel really the key and the thing that, I focus on a lot for myself with my clients is how do we kind of handle ourselves while we are kind of watching things unfold, right? As we are learning, as we are experiencing new, stressful, overstimulating things that are very triggering, how do we kind of compose ourselves? How do we kind of cope with all of that? I think that was really eye-opening for me in that the mechanisms that I had used to cope and deal with stress and whatnot before having kids had to completely change. Like I said, I was in a very high stress career. And so I was I can handle stress. I had literally been told I am very good under pressure, So I was I can do that. Not after having kids. It was very different. One, I wasn't getting any sleep. Right? And so it's very hard to, just push through or be yeah, I'm going to finish this. I'm going to do that. I'll stay up late if I need to. You can't. There was no staying up late. It was, oh, now I'm up every few hours because, I'm breastfeeding, or I'm up every few hours because my kid is somehow 4 years old and still doesn't sleep through the night. Right? So things that maybe you may have relied on, or at least for me, that I relied on in the past. I was very much just muscle through, power through, stay up late if I need to finish up work. If I'm worried about something, let me research and, whatever it is. And it was I can't keep up those coping mechanisms because they're not sustainable. They just don't work for me in this stage of my life. And that was a really hard realization to be like, okay, so now what? Like, what do I do? I am stressed the heck out. Like, how am I supposed to kind of manage? I can't like just go for a walk, or I can't just like go to some class or go to the gym, right? Like I have this child's with me and I need to be present, and I don't have necessarily somebody that can just watch them at at a whim, right? Like that village is not always available, if existent at all. So yeah, there's a lot that you kind of have to relearn, and I think that's one of the things that I did not expect and didn't know was how much of what I thought I knew I was going to have to completely relearn and find a new way of doing while also learning how to be a parent.
Yeah, overall, it's just wild because you have, that's the beauty and probably one of the hardest parts of becoming a parent is that you have to like literally control, alt, delete everything you have learned in the past to be able to bring in all of this new information in. And you're kind of like, people love to make jokes about like the pregnancy brain and the mommy brain. And it's kind of like your body itself is doing you the favor to literally control, alt, delete information that right now it's not needed for you to be able to bring in all the new information that's coming in, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you're also trying to figure out how to learn how to balance out all of these emotions and kind of like learn new coping mechanisms, and be able to control your own emotions while teaching a tiny human to do the same.
Yes.
While trying not to lose it all at the same time. And then if you add another kid, it's just kind of like, I have been in those situations that they echo from each other. I have two girls and they echo from each other, and they're very, especially being, like the way that they are, they just cry when the other one cries. And now when one of them screams, the other one screams, but like hold her ears and is like, it hurts my ears. And I was like, well, you're screaming too. Like, you need to stop. Like, if not, then I'm going to start screaming too, because if we're all screaming right here, like, I'm just going to start screaming with you guys because I don't know what else, And they look at me kind of like, what? Confused. And that's when it stops, right? And so, or I have my 2-year-old that starts crying. The other one starts complaining because the 2-year-old is crying. And so I start pretend crying with them because I'm just like, and they just stop automatically. And my 2-year-old kind of looks at me like, are you okay? And then starts petting me on my head, and it's like, it's okay. And so I give her a hug. I'm like, okay, are we okay now? Okay. And so, so little tricks that I've been learning depending on their personalities.
Yes.
Because my 2-year-old is sassy and she's a jokester. Now, we use the 1, 2, 3 magic. I don't know if you have read that book. It's incredible, and it works. I use that in the classroom. I use it now as a mom. But this one looks at me and she goes kind of like, it's magic, and she's trying to freeze me. And I'm like, are you serious? Like, you just turned 2 and she's already like, shh.
Yep.
Oh, you're frozen. You can't do anything about it. And I'm just like, this girl, like, and then it's just a beautiful thing but it's a lot.
It is. But it's, I love how you were talking about these little techniques, right, that really help to kind of break up the intense emotions that can kind of come up both for the kids and for us. Because I think at the end of the day, that's really that's a big part of what it is. I think when it comes to having children, they trigger us in ways that we don't really expect. Like, I know for me, for example, my daughter is very similar to me. And that is actually really triggering in some ways, because I see all the places that, I wish maybe I were different, right? Or that I saw how acting in that way, for example, I'm very introverted, right? And I remember, as a kid being very shy, and all the ways that that was hard, right? It's hard to make friends, and, it's hard to be left out. And then when you see your child kind of going through some of the similar experiences, right? It's like, oh my God, it's heartbreaking, right? And then you also remember they're beautiful just the way they are. And there's so many beautiful things about how they are, right? And being shy or being introverted is a blessing. in so many ways. And it really does cause you to have to like look, at how you've been thinking about things your whole life. And as they say, like almost like reparent yourself, right? To kind of rethink about like all these things that may have caused you pain or hurt and whatnot. And that's why it can feel triggering and it can feel overstimulating, right? And then bringing kind of gentleness, I don't want to say gentleness, but that sympathy or empathy, right, to your child, but to you too. And so when they are losing their minds or they're screaming, right? And, you're able to bring curiosity or empathy or, play to the situation, right? I think that's so healing for them, but for us too, because at least for me, I know like when my kids are screaming and they're losing it and I am like, done. I'm like, I just want to walk away from all of this for a second. And I can't because, I can't leave my young children unattended for long periods of time. Being able to access that playness, that like silliness, right, is not natural. As adults, that's been squashed over time. And so it can feel really hard to go there. And so it's a very conscious sort of process to go back to that place of being like, okay, well, like what do I need, right? Or think of it from a kid's perspective, like what do they need, right? And a little bit of play, a little bit of fun, a little bit of freezing and magic and, is great. Like one of the things I love to do with my kids when they're sort of like losing it and they're fighting with each other and whatnot, and I'm tired and I'm exhausted and I'm just like, I don't have the energy to sit here and play with you and make sure that everything is okay. And so sometimes I'll literally just like lie down and be like, okay, draw stuff on my back. Like use your finger and draw a shape or draw something on my back and I'll try to guess what it is, right? And like they love it, right? I don't know what they're drawing half the time and I'm just guessing random things and they're like, no, mommy, whatever. And it's like I get to lie down for a second, which like sometimes just the act of being able to like lie down is already like, okay, I can like take a breath. And I can just like chill for a second without having to be following them around or whatnot. And it changes the whole vibe in the house, it really does.
Definitely. Yeah. There's, like I said, like being in the classroom taught me a lot on what reactions can do and affect kids, right? And so when my two, like I said, they echo from each other. Like it since little, like one will cry, the other one will end up crying. Like they don't, they're learning how to deal with each other's personalities and feelings and things like that. And I'm a type C mom. My ADHD and I'm a type C. Like, I think I'm maybe a little bit too laid back sometimes, but I'm very grateful on that part because even though growing up, that was usually looked like poorly on. Because it was always. And at the end of the day, seeing my daughters take some of that, I'm okay with it. Because at the end of the day, like you said at the beginning of our conversation, like as mothers, you have no control. We have no control to very little control. And if you do have a little bit of control, you choose what to do with that tiny bit of control, meaning like, whether it's safe sleep, whether it's, do not give them grapes at a certain age,
Right.
Things like that you do have control over. But when it comes to like their personalities and what they like and what they don't like I didn't know whether we were having girls or boys until they were both born.
I couldn't do that. I was like, I need to know.
Well, the first one was a pandemic baby. And so since it was only going to be my husband and I, we're like, let's make sure that, that moment is just for us.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of like how we saw it. And then we're like, well, if we did it with the first one, let's do it with the second one. But the first round, it was more of like, I don't want the whole color theme, everything pink,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want it. And mind you, I'm an art teacher, so I love all colors. Whatever color, it's fine with me. But I was trying to avoid the whole everything pink because she's a girl and whatever, So I wanted everything gender neutral, and I'm pretty sure I was driving everybody crazy around me, and that's totally okay because if you're pregnant, you have the right to do that.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
And so, but guess what what's my daughter's favorite color?
Pink.
Pink. And the wilder and brighter, and her, like right now I'm looking at her room. Her room is literally light pink, hot pink, lavender.
I so relate to that story. I had a very similar experience with my daughter too. I was like, everything's gonna be gender neutral. I don't want like pink everything, like all my toys. I'm like, no, because if I have more kids, like I don't want everything to just be girly girl. It doesn't matter. She I think dresses up more than I do, like all the accessories, the bows, the jewelry, like everything. I mean, So yes, no, we cannot control it. They are how they are. And I think, for me, I'm curious because about even your experience, because like for me, I know that as a type A mom, I've learned, I think I'm more type C now than when I started, but I definitely went into motherhood very type A. And when, I really thought that I was going to be able to just control, not just, sort of what we did in our day to day, but like just how I wanted things to go. I think I had a lot of expectations, I think really is what it was about, how things were going to be, for example, like the breastfeeding for me, I mentioned it a couple times, like I counsel patients this the time. And I'm all like, fed is best. It really doesn't matter. Like your mental health is what's most important. Like, you can try it if that's something you want to try, but if you don't, formula fed's great. Like all the stuff, right? And yet when it came to myself, there was like something in the back of my head that was like, you really like, that like if you could breastfeed, like that would be ideal. And it was like I couldn't let go of it. And it really was like that expectation. It was like I knew like that it didn't make a difference. Like concretely, like I knew it didn't make a difference and my kid was going to be fine no matter what. But in the back of my mind, I think I had this expectation that like this is something I should be doing, that this is something that in some way, shape, or form equates me doing the best for my child. And I didn't want to feel like I'm not doing the best for them. And again, even though we all know that is not the case. And actually, what ended up happening with my first was that I think I spent my entire maternity leave stressed out about trying to get the breastfeeding down. And, and especially before I went back to work and like I was really struggling, met with the lactation consultants, did all the things, was like really having a hard time with it. And I will say like I feel like I missed out on my entire maternity leave. I really do. I feel like I spent all of it so stressed out over this one thing, that I just like couldn't get the hang of, but I couldn't let go of either. And I think, like that's one example, but there's other ways that kind of comes up in terms of how we approach motherhood, where it was really like, there are things that sometimes we make stressful that has a lot to do with our expectations, and I always say, stress is sort of that gap between our expectations and reality, right? And that's where we create stress, where we're in the back of our minds, we have even sometimes a subconscious expectation of what motherhood is supposed to look like, what being a good mom is supposed to look like, right? How we're supposed to show up at every event and we're supposed to be there for all the moments and we're not supposed to miss anything, right? And then even though like we may concretely tell ourselves like, okay, like that's impossible, that's ridiculous. I'm not gonna, but like subconsciously, like that's the messaging that we get sometimes from family or culture or whatever it is. And then it sits with us and then we start to feel really stressed out when we can't make it to everything or we're not getting the hang of the breastfeeding or whatever it is. And I think that can be really, really tough for women. And I think that's one of the things that I've worked really hard on, sort of resetting those expectations in such a way where I can be like, okay, like, yeah, maybe I feel this particular way. And like, why do I even feel that? Like, where did that even come from, right? And also, what does it mean if I don't hit that expectation, And most of the times it doesn't mean we're a bad mom, it doesn't mean we're doing things wrong, but it can be hard to let go of for sure.
A quick note for parents. Managing family finances can be stressful, right? I've been hearing from a lot of parents who feel the same way. Tools like SoFi and Monarch make it easier to track spending, plan for the future, and feel more confident about your money. definitely worth checking it out. I'm linking both of them below in the show notes. Make sure to check it out. Yeah, and the breastfeeding for me both time was just they both latched on, but I was not able to produce much, right? And it's that, like you said, it's that expectation and that pressure. You know, you're one of the few physicians that I've heard like actually say like fed is best. It's okay, you know. What would I have given to have you at that moment when I first had my first? Because it was like, oh, well, it's okay. Like, you're not, okay, let's do a breastfeeding, you know, let's, you know, course and whatever. Let's try to see how we can help you and things like that. And if it's, you know, I still remember like the second pediatrician for my youngest. And she was like, Maria, I get that you really want to, but you also need to remember you're not a cow, you're not a machine, and it's okay. It's okay. Because both of my girls were reflux babies. The second one, the first one would choke on her reflux, so we ended up in the ER. That stress alone made the amount of milk that I was producing even lower.
Yeah.
Right. So so it's kind of like the whole, like, if you are really stressed out, you know, and you're trying to get pregnant, and the more stress, the less likelihood for you to be able to, right? The same thing with breastfeeding. The more stressed, the more pressure, the less likely that you're going to be able to produce because of that, you know, that stress. And so I was finally able to produce, I think it was like 3 or 4 ounces. And then she started choking on her reflux. And that went back down to 2. And so I think it was 4 months. And I was like, I'm done. I can't continue. And then I looked straight to the pediatrician. I was like, I'm done. I'm not going to try anymore. And he was just like, okay, that's okay. And, you know, we just continued like it was nothing. But it's unfortunate that, I guess, of course, you think it's like, it's biological. You're supposed to, your body's supposed to, you know. Some women actually start producing milk even before the baby comes out. And you're like, how come I can't? And it's such a frustrating aspect that you get angry with your body of like, but why? You know? Right. And instead of giving yourself some grace because of everything else that your body is doing, you know. And the second time around, she ended up in the ER because she had blood in her stool. And mind you, I already knew that she had reflux, meaning that I already had the what not to eat list.
Right.
Which is like, I don't even know, like, I think it was like 5-6 page. Oh my God, it's ridiculous, like the amount of things that you cannot eat. And the food that you cannot find in the United States that don't have half of those things. And so you're like, okay, now what? And so, and I still remember the GI doctor and that emergency doctor that they were like, well, if you want, you can go ahead and continue pumping. Just feed her, you know, formula, and then maybe in 6 months, try again to breastfeed her. You think I'm gonna be here with a timer pumping for the next
6 months?
6 months, 2 to 3, every 2 to 3 hours. If any mom out there has done it, listen. Wow, you're a champ. Like, you are a champ. You had a goal. You made it. That was not me. Like I said, my type C personality, that takes consistency. Let's start off with that. ADHD people tend to not really be too consistent. And no, it's just, for me, it was just too much. And I decided to stop. And probably the best decision I could have taken for my own mental health. And guess what? My daughters did stop having so much reflux. They didn't have blood in their stools. Things got better.
And can we just like highlight that for a second? Because the fact that you listened to yourself and your needs and what was best for you at that time is everything. Like, I literally want everybody who is listening to this to recognize that, because that's what I did not do the first time around. And I am telling you that it absolutely affected my, you know, mental health in the sense that, like, I didn't really get to enjoy those first few months. You know, I'm bonding with my child in a way that, like, oh, breastfeeding is supposed to do that. And like, it was a frustrating experience for me. And I had the opposite issue, actually, where I overproduced. So I got mastitis twice because she just wasn't like latching well and wasn't taking enough. And I like couldn't keep up with, it was like, don't pump too much because then you'll overproduce more. But then like she wasn't taking it, but I was overproducing. So it was like a whole big thing. And, I felt like I had to keep going. And I didn't actually listen to myself. And, in my story, I will say I'll be totally transparent about the fact that I think I had 3 months I went back at 3 months or so, and I literally was like, okay, I'm done. I can't, like, I don't know what to do. I can't go back to work and pump like at this level and have her like not taking, and I don't know what to do. Her feeds would take like an hour every time. I was like, I don't know how to manage this. Like, I have to stop. And I remember calling the lactation consultant and being like, what do I do to like stop the milk supply like today? Like, I'm going back like in a few days and I don't know what to do. Like, I need to stop the milk. And, you know, she was kind of like walking me through things that I could do. And magically, then somehow, of course, when I decided to give it all up, my daughter like learns how to latch and we're like doing great. So I was like, okay. So, I mean, it ended up being fine, but I still think back to the fact that like, I feel like I did miss out, and I feel like it affected my mental health in a way that it didn't need to. I can't say that I was like depressed or I was anxious, but I was hyper focused on one specific aspect of this that really in the long run did not matter. It doesn't matter if you breastfed or you're, you know, formula fed or what you choose to do. At the end of the day, like your kids are probably, you know, all eating fries from like the floor at some point anyway, right? Yeah. Like if you haven't seen those memes, like I feel like I see them going around all the time. And it really was that like, okay, what would have been best for my mental health, right? I was so focused on her, on the child, on what's best for her. I wasn't really thinking about what's best for me. But the thing is, what would have been best for me to like be easy on myself, to just be like, hey, like this isn't the experience that I wanted to have. This isn't quite working. Like, let's try formula, right? Would have probably been the best thing for her too, because she would have had a mom that wasn't so stressed out, right? And I probably would have been able to even bond better with her. You know, we probably could have had more fun. I mean, again, it was like the first 3 months of life, but I'm using this as sort of more of an example. Like those sorts of situations happen, you know, throughout their childhood too, where we get so focused on trying to do something for our kids, right? Because we want the best for them. And we lose sight of the fact that like, if it's not the best thing for us too, then we're not going to be able to show up in the way that they actually need. And I see this, you know, I'm in a different phase right now where I have toddlers and like, you know, my oldest is in elementary school now. And I see this with like after school activities, right? And I'm like, well, I have to, you know, got to put her in everything, right? Like I didn't have that when I was young and I want her to have everything I didn't have, and very much that mentality. And then you get to a point where it's like, well, half the time she's like, I don't even want to go, Mom. Like, can I just stay and play? You know, can I play with you? Like that's what she wants, right? And again, it's this. And I'm like driving myself crazy, right? Like, you know, I got to make it to here and I got to do that and I got to take him here and blah, 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 right? And you really, you know, I think it's just another example of like, sometimes we're trying so hard to do what we think is best for our kids, and we lose sight of ourselves. We lose sight of, hey, this is really, you know, what is going to reduce the stress for me. And anytime we can reduce our own stress, we're actually giving our kids a gift, because they really just want us. They want us and our presence, right? Especially in the younger years. That's what they want more than anything. And if they can have a mom who's not stressed, who's not, you know, super like crazy about like her work or trying to fit everything in and juggle everything in, right? You know, like they really don't need as much as sometimes we think we need to give them. And those expectations that, again, we set for ourselves, and the control we want to have to like give them this perfect childhood experience that we didn't get to have. You know, but I think it's always goes back to what you were saying of that's great. And we all strive to do that because we're all awesome, amazing moms who love our children. But it's really important to keep in mind, like, where is your sanity at? You know, where's your mental health at? And where's your stress level at? And how do we get to a place that's more sustainable? I don't like to use the word balanced, because I think balanced, you know, can trip people up. Like, things are never perfectly balanced, right? We give and we take, and it's always kind of a fluctuating. But I think sustainability is really like the key. Like, can I keep this up without driving myself insane, you know? And if not, like, what needs to change and what's really important here, you know?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I could tell you this much. I used to work with middle school and high schoolers, right? I love the middle school stage. I love teenagers and preteens, and people look at me like I'm crazy because they're like, why? Like they're a hot mess. But here's the best part of it all. What they need, no matter what age they are, is you. They need you to be stable. They need you to be healthy. They need you to be calm. And obviously, at the end of the day, we're all human. And I'm not saying not to show them chaotic, because at the end of the day, like, they need to see that you're human, right? And that's another thing, that we take it to the next extreme, right? And like, my mom tried her very best to do the best that she could with what she learned. But one thing that till this day, it's very hard for my mom to show any type of emotions in front of us, is this mask, right? And being a mom and being an educator, I can tell you this much: when you show kids that you are also human,
Yes.
and yes, you might get angry, but you apologize. Meaning right there, you're teaching them a very valuable lesson of life, that, man, like, they're going to get angry. They might do something, say something, but then they take accountability for their actions. And so those are lessons that I really, truly believe that will make such a huge difference. And they're not going to, like, I'm not saying to have a messy house, like a crazy, like, dirty house or whatever, because at the end of the day, we all need to live, like, in a sanitized home. But they're not going to remember if you forgot to put in the dishes. They're not going to remember if you did your bed or if you didn't do your bed, or if the pillow was put in the certain color coded, and I get it. There's personalities like that, right? But like you said, we get so fixated in certain things and certain activities or expectations that we think that is what they need, when in reality, they just need you to be present and for you to be there. Like, if you were to go back and you start thinking about your own childhood, what are your memories?
Right.
And most of the time, kids tend to remember how you made them feel more than the actual situation of what happened at that moment. So yeah, I agree with you 100% that I know it is hard, because yes, even though I'm type C and I have ADHD, I'm not saying I don't fixate on things, because yes, I do. But I try to always, when I start feeling the anxiety, I try to step back, because I'm realizing that, or my girls start getting too intense. And that's when I start reflecting on, wait a second. Usually when kids start becoming very intense or have a lot of tantrums, it's a cry out for something. Or when teenagers have this attitude with you, it's usually not really to piss you off. It's actually a crying out type of messaging for you to stop what you're doing and listen and see what it is that it's the missing puzzle piece of what's going. And most of the time, it's just time with you.
Yeah. I always say, like, the three key things I think about when they're acting out is, do they need rest? Do they need food? Or do they need connection? It's usually like one of those three things, And if you can just kind of like test those things out, like, usually you can kind of figure out what it is that they need that's leading to, like, the tantrum and the outburst and whatnot. And the other thing I wanted to say, that I think is really important, because I hear a lot of moms also say, like, okay, like, I want to be more calm, right? Like, I want to be more calm. And I think this is really important. I try to, when I'm working with clients, be like, okay, the goal here is, let's reframe this to not necessarily being calm. Because I think sometimes what we do when we put that pressure, right, it's like, well, I got to be calm. And I use this word all the time too. So I'm not saying like we shouldn't, but like, the idea is that I would rather you be regulated, right, than calm. And I just want to highlight that distinction for anybody listening, because I used to always try to be calm. I thought that if I was calm, I was being a good mom. And all I did was like build up and build up and build up until I couldn't be calm anymore. And then I exploded, and then I was rage mom, right? And I think that's what happens to a lot of us, is we're trying to hold it all in, because we're like, well, we don't want to yell. We don't want to be that parent. Right? And instead, we stuff it down. And that's almost worse, because then when it comes out in this totally uncontrolled way that often creates a lot more damage than it needed to in the first place, right? And then again, repair and all of that is essential, right? And a big part of it, but it's like, okay, if we can focus on how to stay regulated, which means I can be angry, I can be frustrated, I can be overstimulated, and just like you said, I can show them those emotions. It's okay for our kids to see those emotions, because when they see it, if we can also show them how we deal with them, that's how they learn, right? That's one of the hard things, I think, for our generation, of being a parent, is for a lot of us, we didn't see our parents do that. Right? Like you were saying, like, you didn't see that emotion, right? Or you just saw them lash out, right? So there was no, like, we didn't really necessarily learn how to regulate our emotions. And now it's like, well, we're trying to learn and we're trying to teach our kids at the same time, which is hard, which is really, really hard. But again, like, I think I wanted to highlight that because I think that's such an important message about, like, you're right. It's not just about like being calm and not having emotions. It's really about having the emotions, experiencing them, but in a healthy way, right? Where you're not just unloading and you have an outlet for it that your kids can see. They can see how you deal with anger, how you deal with frustration, how you deal with overstimulation or sadness or whatnot, so that then when they feel those things, they can learn from it too. And for me, I think that has been maybe my biggest motivation in terms of, learning how to regulate for myself. One, I don't think I even realized I needed to learn that until I became a mother, because then the demands were so high that it was like, whoa, I actually can't deal with this level of stress. I thought I could. I thought I was really good at managing stress. And now I realize, like, I actually can't. Like, I have a max and I'm hitting that max because motherhood just has that many extra demands on top of everything. But also, like, now that I'm learning it, I want to learn because I want my kids to know. I don't want them to get burnt out or, to express themselves in ways that they're not necessarily feeling good about,
Yeah, 100%. And if they do get to the point, how can they be able to manage it if they do hit that point? And I agree with you. And then also kind of like pointing out, there's a difference between, like your calm and my calm, right? And that's another thing that society likes to bring of like what really is calm and what is balance. No, man, at the end of the day, what your calm is, it's a whole different, especially, you being more maybe type B, not that you're like in between. But, I can guarantee you, like, it's just seeing what works for you, the dynamic for your personality, the dynamic of your family, the dynamic of the environment of your home. Because what may seem calm to me might seem chaotic to you, or, and being okay, because at the end of the day, like, something in motherhood, mom guilt is real, mom shaming is real, and we need to learn how to also turn down the volume to those voices, and learn what is your calm, learn how to what works for you, for your kids. Because at the end of the day, every single kid, kind of like we addressed earlier, every single kid has their own personality. They're unique in their own ways, and what may work for one kid, it's not going to work for the other kid. And we need to learn how to adapt quickly onto that, and I get it. It's not easy. It is very challenging. And like you said, our generation right now is not only learning how to parent, but also parenting ourselves and hugging our inner child, because we're trying to figure out how to deal with our own emotions at the same time. So give, whoever's listening, give yourself a little bit of grace, because it's not easy, but we want you to know that you're not alone. So, on that note, what is one of the last messages that you would like to leave off to our listeners? And if they want to go ahead and contact you, where can they find you?
Yeah, so first of all, I just want to thank you for having this conversation, because I think this is such important, like, messaging. And I wish that, especially in the early stages of motherhood, that I had this, and I think the more that we can find people and talk to people and have that sense of community, the more, like you said, we realize that we're not alone. It doesn't need to be normal to feel constantly stressed out in motherhood. And I think sometimes there's this expectation that, like, oh, that's just the season of life. That's just how it is, And it's like, no, like it doesn't need to be that way, actually. And there are things that we can do, and there are ways that we can, create systems and whatnot that make our lives easier, but also that we can lower, or not necessarily lower expectations, but make our expectations meet our reality, and reframe things in a way that works for us and our family. And that may look totally different than everybody else. And that is a-okay. And getting that confidence to do, what works for your family. I think it's just really important that people realize that it doesn't need to look any particular way, and that there are actual tools, that we can use that I had to learn really on how to create my life and structure my days with my family so that it made sense for us and so that I wasn't stressed out. Because that does not need to be your normal. It really, really does not. And there are things you can do about it. And then in terms of how to reach me, I am on Instagram and TikTok and Threads. My handle is Sandra Fernandes, MD. Fernandez is with an S at the end, not a Z. And also my website is sandrafernandez.com. So feel free to, DM me or reach out, email me. I'm always happy to hear from people. Love to hear what's challenging in your stages of motherhood and how I can help.
Thank you so much. And I'll be linking everything underneath the description here. So that way, in case you want to have a chat with Sandra, you're more than welcome to. And I believe you're also a coach. So in case you want to have extra help when it comes to just life overall.
Yeah. Especially if you're feeling stressed or burnt out, there's a lot that we can do to help you with that. So reach out.
Definitely. Because yes, you do not have to. I promise you. I know society tells you that and they try to make jokes about it. And in reality, motherhood can be enjoyable.
Yeah.
So
It's hard. It's hard. Don't get me wrong. But it doesn't need to be stressful all the time.
Hey moms, if today's episode resonated with you, I just want to quickly mention I help moms reclaim rest, balance, and peace of mind through personalized sleep and life coaching plans. If you want extra support, you can book a free consultation with me anytime. I'm linking all the details in the show notes below. And don't forget to subscribe, share, and like so you never miss an episode. Stay tuned.